The air was thick with anticipation as the lawyer's voice echoed through the dimly lit parlor of the old family estate. The room, with its creaky wooden floors and dusty chandeliers, seemed to hold its breath along with the assembled family members. Each of them was trying to mask their curiosity behind polite smiles, their eyes occasionally darting toward the lawyer, whose every word felt heavy with promise. Samantha, the youngest of the cousins, clutched the edge of her chair, her knuckles turning white. She had always been the dreamer in the family, with a penchant for adventure. Today, her dreams seemed closer to reality, but the weight of the unknown made her heart race. Her cousin Michael, ever the skeptic, sat with his arms crossed, a frown etched deeply on his face. He wasn't one to get excited about such formalities, but the promise of an inheritance piqued his interest nonetheless. The lawyer, Mr. Harrington, cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. As stipulated in the will of your great-uncle, Charles Pembroke, each of you is entitled to a share of his estate. His voice was a low murmur, almost reverential, as he continued. However, there is a specific condition attached to this inheritance. The room seemed to lean in collectively, the tension almost palpable. Samantha glanced at the ornate grandfather clock in the corner, its hands ticking away the seconds that felt like hours. The clock's rhythmic ticking was the only sound that dared to break the suffocating silence. Mr. Harrington reached into his briefcase and produced a thick envelope, its edges yellowed with age. Along with the financial assets, Mr. Pembroke left behind a safe deposit box. Its location is detailed in this document. He held up the envelope, letting it catch the light as he passed it around. Michael took the envelope with a skeptical look, his fingers brushing against the aged paper. "What's in the box?" he asked, breaking the silence that had followed Mr. Harrington's announcement. "Mr. Pembroke was rather secretive about its contents," Mr. Harrington replied. "He only mentioned that it holds items of significant personal value, but their nature remains unknown." The family exchanged uneasy glances. Samantha could almost hear the collective heartbeat of the room. The prospect of hidden treasures or family secrets was tantalizing, yet a layer of unease settled over them. As the reading concluded, Mr. Harrington took his leave, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallways of the old house. The family gathered around the old mahogany table, the envelope lying in the center like a mysterious artifact. Samantha's mind raced with possibilities, her imagination already painting vivid pictures of what the safe might hold. Michael, on the other hand, tapped his fingers impatiently, eager to get the whole affair over with. "Let's open it then," he suggested, trying to sound nonchalant but failing to hide the glimmer of curiosity in his eyes. The family agreed, and as they made their way to the bank, the car ride was filled with a tense, excited chatter. Samantha sat quietly, her thoughts swirling around the unknown. The old family estate, with its faded grandeur and creaky corners, seemed to whisper secrets of its own. The journey to the bank felt both urgent and interminable, each moment stretching out as they approached the climax of their anticipation. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows as they arrived at the bank. The imposing structure, with its heavy stone columns and grand entrance, seemed almost to guard its secrets with pride. Inside, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to the chaos of the outside world, a cool, quiet sanctuary. As they approached the bank manager's office, Samantha could feel her heartbeat quicken. The manager, a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor, greeted them and led them to a secure room where the safe deposit box awaited. The room was sterile and quiet, the anticipation hanging in the air like an electric charge. The safe, old and slightly rusted, stood as a sentinel to the past. The manager opened it with practiced ease, and the box was finally in their hands. The family members gathered around, their faces a mixture of excitement and apprehension. As the box was unlocked, Samantha took a deep breath. The first glimpse inside would determine whether their journey would lead to treasure or trouble. The lid creaked open, revealing a trove of dusty old papers and a few intriguing artifacts. The moment stretched out, the contents of the box waiting to be revealed. The old papers and artifacts were like keys to a mystery yet to be unraveled, each item holding a story, a secret, or perhaps both. The family's collective gaze fixed on the contents, their fate intertwined with the secrets of the past. With the stage set and the stakes high, the family prepared to delve into the unknown, unaware of how these revelations would forever alter their lives. The cool, musty air of the bank's secure room enveloped the family as they huddled around the old safe deposit box. Its heavy, metal exterior, scarred with age, seemed to carry a weight of its own, a silent testament to the secrets it had guarded over decades. The manager's voice was a low murmur, a backdrop to the rising tension among the family members. Samantha, her hands trembling slightly, watched as the manager unlocked the safe. The sound of the tumblers clicking into place seemed louder than ever, a herald of the unknown. She exchanged a glance with Michael, who was leaning forward, his face a mask of stoic curiosity. His usual skepticism was momentarily overshadowed by a glimmer of excitement. The manager carefully lifted the box from its resting place and set it on the table. The old, brass hinges squeaked as he opened it, the sound slicing through the thick silence of the room. The lid swung upward with a groan, revealing the contents inside. A jumble of dusty papers, tarnished metal objects, and a few aged photographs. The room seemed to hold its breath as Samantha peered inside. The sight of the artifacts, each one enshrouded in layers of dust, was both thrilling and foreboding. The family leaned closer, their faces illuminated by the soft, flickering light from the overhead lamp. Samantha reached in, her fingers brushing against a stack of yellowed letters bound with a frayed ribbon. She carefully untied the ribbon and lifted the letters from the box. The faded ink on the envelopes hinted at stories long forgotten. The letters were addressed to someone named Eleanor, with no return address. Samantha's curiosity was piqued. Who was Eleanor? And what secrets did these letters hold? Michael's gaze was fixed on an old, leather-bound book nestled at the bottom of the box. Its cover was cracked and worn, the title barely legible. With a sense of reverence, he lifted it out, opening it to reveal a handwritten journal. The pages were filled with elegant script, but the language was archaic and unfamiliar. Michael's frustration was evident. He wanted answers now, but the book was an enigma waiting to be deciphered. In the meantime, the others rummaged through the box. Susan, the eldest cousin, found a collection of faded photographs, black and white images of strangers who seemed to peer out from another era. Each photograph was labeled with names and dates, but the connections remained unclear. Susan's eyes narrowed in concentration as she tried to piece together the puzzle of the family's past. The atmosphere in the room grew more intense as they continued to examine the contents. The family members exchanged glances, each of them grappling with their own thoughts and emotions. The old, leather-bound book and the stack of letters seemed to hold the key to a mystery that was just beginning to unfold. Suddenly, the bank manager cleared his throat, drawing their attention. "If you need any assistance with interpreting these documents, please let me know," he offered before quietly stepping out of the room. The door closed with a soft click, leaving the family alone with their discoveries. Samantha's fingers trembled as she opened one of the letters. The delicate paper crackled softly, and she began to read aloud. The letter spoke of a secret rendezvous, a hidden location, and a promise of something valuable. The words were cryptic, hinting at a deeper story hidden within the folds of time. Michael, frustrated by his inability to decipher the journal, threw it down onto the table with a frustrated sigh. "We need to get this translated," he said, his tone revealing his impatience. "These old documents aren't going to solve themselves." Susan, her eyes still fixed on the photographs, sighed. "We need more context. These people, they look important, but who are they?" The family's frustration was palpable as they realized the magnitude of the task before them. The safe had given them a glimpse into a past that was both intriguing and perplexing. The scattered clues hinted at a story that spanned decades, but the full picture remained out of reach. As the family packed up the items, the air was filled with a sense of urgency and unease. The mysteries of the past were now a part of their present, and they were left to unravel the tangled web of secrets that had been left behind. The old safe, once a simple metal box, had become a portal to a world of hidden truths and unanswered questions. With the contents of the box safely packed away, the family left the bank, their minds buzzing with possibilities. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The discovery of the old safe was only the beginning of a much larger adventure. The shadows of the past had been stirred, and the search for answers had only just begun. As they stepped into the fading light of the evening, the sense of anticipation was replaced by the weight of impending revelations. The past had been unlocked, and the future was now a canvas waiting to be filled with the stories that would emerge from the secrets of the old safe. The family gathered in Samantha's living room, the evening sun casting a warm glow through the sheer curtains. The old, leather-bound book and the stack of letters were spread out on the coffee table, their secrets tantalizingly close but still shrouded in mystery. Samantha and Michael had spent the afternoon trying to make sense of their discoveries, with little success. Samantha took a deep breath, the weight of anticipation heavy on her shoulders. She carefully unfolded one of the letters, its edges crinkling softly. The script, though faded, was still legible. The letter was dated from the early 1900s, its tone both formal and intimate. She began to read aloud, her voice steady but tinged with curiosity. "My dearest Eleanor," she started, her voice weaving through the room like a thread connecting the past to the present. "I write to you under the cloak of night, for it is the only time I am free from prying eyes. The time has come for us to make our move. The vault beneath the old chapel holds what we need to secure our future." Michael shifted in his seat, his eyes narrowing as he focused on the words. "A vault beneath the old chapel? Sounds like a secret hideout," he murmured, his skepticism momentarily giving way to intrigue. Susan, who had been studying the photographs, looked up with a start. "The chapel. I remember Great-Aunt Eleanor mentioning a family chapel in one of her stories. It was always said to be abandoned." Samantha's eyes widened as she absorbed this new piece of information. "So, the chapel might be connected to this vault? That would mean—" Her words trailed off as she glanced at the leather-bound book, its cover now worn and cracked. Michael picked up the book, flipping through its pages with growing frustration. "This journal might be the key. If only we could understand it," he said, his tone betraying his impatience. The room fell into a contemplative silence as Samantha and Michael exchanged looks. The letters had hinted at something significant, but the journal's cryptic language remained an obstacle. Susan, sensing the growing tension, reached for a photograph from the stack. It depicted a group of people standing in front of a grand, old building. "Who are these people?" Susan asked, holding the photograph up for the others to see. The faces were solemn and stern, their expressions betraying no hint of the secrets they might have held. Samantha leaned in, examining the photograph more closely. "They look like they might be from the same era as the letters. Could they be connected to the vault or the chapel?" Michael nodded, his earlier frustration giving way to focused determination. "We need to find out more about this chapel and its connection to the vault. The photographs and letters are pieces of a larger puzzle." The family's resolve solidified as they made plans to investigate the chapel. The prospect of uncovering hidden history and unearthing long-buried secrets provided a new sense of purpose. The old safe had opened a door to a world of intrigue, and they were ready to step through it. As the evening deepened into twilight, the family prepared for the journey ahead. Samantha gathered the letters and photographs, carefully packing them away. Michael made notes about the chapel and the potential clues in the journal, while Susan continued to pore over the photographs, searching for any additional details. The transition from discovery to action was seamless, driven by a shared sense of urgency and curiosity. The old safe had not only revealed physical artifacts, but had also ignited a quest for truth that bound the family together. Each item uncovered was a step closer to unraveling the mysteries of their past, and the search for the chapel and its secrets became their next immediate goal. As they prepared to leave, the family was united by a common purpose. The old chapel loomed on the horizon, a symbol of the past waiting to be explored. The journey to uncover its secrets was about to begin, and the echoes of the past promised to reveal themselves in ways they could never have anticipated. With the final preparations complete, the family set out into the night, their minds filled with anticipation and their hearts driven by the promise of discovery. The old safe had set them on a path toward the unknown, and the adventure of uncovering their family's hidden history was just beginning. The following morning brought a chill to the air as the family gathered at Samantha's house, each member bearing the weight of anticipation and lingering questions. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows through the window as the group assembled around the breakfast table. The remnants of their late-night planning were scattered across the table: letters, photographs, and notes, each a piece of the puzzle they were determined to solve. Samantha, with a resolute expression, poured coffee into mugs, her hands steady despite the unease she felt. The excitement from the previous day had given way to a more complicated reality. Michael, ever the skeptic, paced back and forth, his frustration evident as he reviewed the journal's text once more. The family's eagerness to uncover the chapel's secrets was now tangled with underlying tensions. "So, what's the plan?" Michael asked, his voice tight with impatience. "Are we just going to wander around looking for an old chapel based on a few vague references? We need a solid lead." Susan, who had been quietly reviewing the photographs, looked up sharply. "It's not just wandering. The letters mentioned a vault beneath the chapel. That's a specific location. We need to follow these leads and see where they take us." Her tone was defensive, and it was clear that tempers were fraying. Michael's frown deepened. "And what if we're wasting our time? We have no idea if this chapel even exists anymore. We could be chasing ghosts." Samantha intervened, trying to mediate the growing discord. "We're all frustrated, but the evidence points to something significant. We have to at least check it out. If we don't, we might never know." Her attempt to calm the situation only seemed to heighten the tension. Michael's irritation flared. "And what about the journal? We can't just ignore it because it's confusing. It might be the key to everything." Susan's eyes narrowed. "Well, if you had paid more attention last night instead of just dismissing things, we might have made more progress. It's not just about the journal. It's about putting everything together." The argument grew louder, each voice rising in frustration as the disagreements reached a boiling point. The breakfast table became a battleground of conflicting opinions and escalating emotions. The search for the chapel, which had started as an exciting adventure, now felt like a contentious quest filled with familial strife. Amid the shouting, Samantha's thoughts drifted back to the letters and the photograph of the chapel. She could almost see the building in her mind's eye, its worn stones and ivy-clad walls, a silent witness to the past. The arguments continued, but she found herself focusing on the core of their quest, the truth hidden in those old documents. The sound of a doorbell ringing cut through the argument, offering a brief respite. Samantha went to answer it, hoping the interruption would defuse the tension. Standing on the doorstep was an elderly woman, her eyes bright with curiosity. "I'm sorry to intrude," the woman said with a warm smile, "but I couldn't help but overhear that you're looking for information about the old chapel. I might be able to help." The family's argument halted abruptly as they turned their attention to the newcomer. Her presence seemed to bring a sudden calm, like a lighthouse in a storm. They ushered her inside, their previous disputes momentarily forgotten as they focused on the potential new lead. The woman introduced herself as Mrs. Whitaker, a local historian with a deep knowledge of the area's past. She had heard about the family's search and had some valuable insights to share. As she settled into a chair and began to speak, her knowledge about the chapel and its history captivated the family. She revealed that the chapel had been a center of local history and intrigue for decades, its vaults and hidden rooms a subject of many local legends. According to her, the chapel had been abandoned for years but was still mentioned in Old Town records. As Mrs. Whitaker continued her tale, the family listened intently, their earlier discord fading into the background. The possibility of a genuine lead brought a renewed sense of purpose and unity. The arguments and misunderstandings were momentarily set aside as they absorbed the new information. The tension in the room transformed into focused determination. With Mrs. Whitaker's guidance, the family planned their next steps, ready to confront the mysteries of the chapel with a fresh perspective. The discord of the morning had given way to a shared resolve, the promise of discovery rekindling their collective enthusiasm. The morning sun peeked through the gaps in the curtains as the family prepared for their visit to the old chapel. Samantha, Michael, Susan, and Mrs. Whitaker gathered their belongings and reviewed the notes they had made. The sense of anticipation from the previous evening had transformed into a palpable urgency. The chapel, with its rumored secrets and hidden vaults, beckoned them. The drive to the chapel was a quiet one, the tension of the morning's argument still lingering in the air. Mrs. Whitaker guided them with detailed directions, her voice calm and reassuring. The family exchanged occasional glances, each person lost in their thoughts about what lay ahead. As they approached the chapel, the landscape shifted from suburban sprawl to overgrown foliage and neglected fields. The old building loomed ahead, its once grand structure now a crumbling relic of the past. The ivy-clad walls and broken stained glass windows told a story of neglect and abandonment. Samantha parked the car, and they all stepped out, their footsteps crunching on the gravel as they approached the chapel's entrance. The building stood silent, a testament to forgotten times. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and moss, a stark contrast to the anticipation that buzzed among the family members. Mrs. Whitaker led the way, her familiarity with the chapel evident in her confident stride. The family followed closely behind, their excitement tempered by the weight of their mission. They entered through the large wooden doors, which creaked ominously on their hinges. Inside, the chapel was a dark, cavernous space. The sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting a muted, colorful glow on the dusty pews and altar. The chapel's interior was a jumble of forgotten relics. Pews overturned, dust-covered hymnals, and cobwebs draping from the ceiling beams. The contrast between the chapel's former glory and its current state was striking. Mrs. Whitaker led them down a narrow, winding staircase at the back of the chapel. The steps were uneven and worn, and the descent into darkness seemed almost symbolic of the secrets they were about to uncover. The air grew cooler as they reached the bottom, and the sound of their footsteps echoed off the stone walls. At the base of the stairs, they found themselves in a small, dimly lit room. The walls were lined with old wooden shelves, some of which held dusty, forgotten items. In the center of the room was an old, iron door with an ornate, but rusted lock. This, Mrs. Whitaker explained, was the entrance to the vault mentioned in the letters. Samantha's heart raced as she examined the door. "This must be it," she said, her voice tinged with both excitement and apprehension. Michael approached the door with a scrutinizing look. "We need to get this open, but first, let's check if there are any clues around here that might help." Susan and Mrs. Whitaker began searching the room for anything that could provide additional information. Susan found a loose brick in the wall and gingerly removed it, revealing a small, hidden compartment. Inside, there were more old papers and a rusty key. Michael took the key and inspected it. "This could be for the vault. Let's try it." With a deep breath, he inserted the key into the lock and turned it. The lock clicked open with a satisfying sound, and the heavy door creaked as it slowly swung inward. A rush of musty air escaped from the vault, carrying with it the scent of long-forgotten history. Inside, the vault was filled with dusty old crates and boxes. The family began to carefully examine the contents. There were numerous documents, more photographs, and several ornate wooden boxes. Each item seemed to hold a piece of the puzzle they were trying to solve. As they sorted through the boxes, the room was filled with a sense of discovery and tension. Each document was examined with care, and each photograph was scrutinized for clues. The past was slowly revealing itself, but the process was far from straightforward. Susan pulled out an old, leather-bound book, similar to the one they had found in the safe. The book was filled with handwritten notes and diagrams, some of which were written in a language that none of them could fully understand. The complexity of the book added another layer to the mystery. As the family worked, the strains of their earlier argument seemed to resurface. Michael's frustration with the cryptic nature of the documents was evident, while Susan's impatience with the slow progress was becoming more apparent. The task of deciphering the secrets from the past was proving to be more challenging than they had anticipated. Mrs. Whitaker tried to offer guidance, but her own knowledge was limited. The contradictions and gaps in the information only added to the confusion. The more they uncovered, the more it seemed that the past was reluctant to reveal its secrets easily. The tension between the family members grew as they struggled with the mounting frustration. The excitement of discovery was tempered by the reality of the conflicts and disagreements that had resurfaced. The search for answers was proving to be a test of patience and unity. The day was overcast as the family returned from the chapel, their spirits dampened by the growing sense of frustration. The secrets they had hoped to uncover remained stubbornly elusive, their path cluttered with confusing clues and unresolved tensions. The drive back was quiet, each member lost in their own thoughts, reflecting on the morning's discoveries and disputes. Samantha's house was a sanctuary of sorts, providing a familiar space where they could regroup and reassess. They entered the living room, and the weight of the day seemed to press heavily on their shoulders. The vault's contents were spread across the table, documents, photographs, and books all laid out in disarray. Samantha took a deep breath and started sorting through the items, her eyes scanning each page with renewed determination. The previous arguments seemed to have left a mark on her resolve, but she was determined to find a breakthrough. Michael paced the room, his frustration palpable. "We're missing something," he said, running a hand through his hair. "These documents don't make sense on their own. There must be a pattern or a key we're overlooking." Susan, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a stack of photographs, looked up. The photographs might be a clue. Some of them have dates and places written on the back. Maybe we can find a connection between them and the documents. Mrs. Whitaker, who had been examining an old map found in the vault, nodded in agreement. "That's a good idea. If we can match locations from the photographs with the places mentioned in the documents, we might be able to piece together more of the story." The family began working in earnest, their collective focus shifting to the task at hand. The photographs, once mere images of the past, were now seen as potential keys to unlocking the mysteries they faced. They laid out each photograph and cross-referenced it with the documents, searching for any overlap or indication of relevance. As the hours passed, the room was filled with a sense of urgency. The weight of their quest seemed to press down on them, each new clue adding to the pressure. The initial excitement of discovery had given way to a more intense and demanding phase of their search. Michael found a pattern in the dates written on the back of the photographs. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a photograph of the chapel from the early 1900s. "The date matches a significant entry in the journal. Maybe there's a connection between this photo and the events described here." Samantha's eyes lit up with a spark of hope. "If we can confirm that, it might help us understand what's really hidden in the vault." They worked late into the evening, piecing together the fragments of their investigation. The room was lit only by the soft glow of desk lamps, casting long shadows on the walls. The sense of pressure was palpable, each member of the family feeling the weight of their collective effort. At one point, Susan let out a gasp. "I think I've found something." She held up a photograph showing the chapel and a nearby old mill. On the back of the photo was a note with coordinates and a cryptic message. "Where the mill meets the river, truth will be revealed." Michael took the photograph and compared it with the map. The coordinates point to a location near the chapel. If there's something hidden there, it could be connected to the vault. Samantha, feeling a renewed surge of determination, turned to Mrs. Whitaker. "Do you know of any old mills near the chapel?" Mrs. Whitaker thought for a moment before nodding. "Yes, there's an old mill just a short distance from the chapel. It's been abandoned for years, but it's still standing. It might be worth checking out." The family's excitement was tempered by the exhaustion of their long day, but the new lead provided a glimmer of hope. They decided to visit the mill the following morning, their spirits buoyed by the possibility of a breakthrough. As they prepared for bed, the tension of the day seemed to dissipate, replaced by a cautious optimism. The search for the truth was far from over, but the clues they had uncovered brought them one step closer to understanding the secrets of their family's past. The morning mist still clung to the fields as the family approached the old mill, its silhouette rising against the gray sky. The previous day's discoveries had rekindled their resolve, but the weight of anticipation and exhaustion was evident in their weary faces. The mill, abandoned and overgrown with vines, loomed ahead like a forgotten sentinel of the past. Samantha parked the car and led the way toward the mill, each step crunching on the gravel path that had long been forgotten. Michael followed closely, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of the hidden truth they sought. Susan and Mrs. Whitaker trailed behind, their expressions a mix of hope and apprehension. The mill's weathered wooden structure groaned under the pressure of time. The large, broken wheel stood still, its once mighty presence now a rusted relic. The family made their way to the entrance, a wooden door hanging loosely on its hinges. Samantha pushed it open, the creak of the door echoing through the empty space. Inside, the mill was dark and musty, its interior cloaked in shadows. The remnants of old machinery were scattered about, covered in layers of dust and cobwebs. The air was thick with the scent of decay and neglect. The family spread out, each member searching for anything that might connect to the clues they had uncovered. Susan's flashlight beam danced across the walls, revealing old workbenches and abandoned tools. "We need to find anything that matches the description from the photograph," she called out, her voice carrying a note of urgency. Michael and Samantha started exploring the corners of the mill, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. They moved carefully, their eyes keen for any sign of hidden compartments or markings. Mrs. Whitaker focused on an old ledger she found on a dusty shelf, hoping it might provide additional information. As they worked, the tension among the family members began to resurface. The pressure of the search, combined with lingering frustrations, started to show. Michael's impatience flared as he struggled with the disorganized remnants of the mill. "This place is a mess," he snapped. "We could be here all day and find nothing." Samantha, trying to maintain her composure, replied, "We have to keep looking. The photograph mentioned a specific location, and we need to be thorough." The mood in the mill was tense, each member of the family feeling the strain of their quest. The search for answers seemed to be taking a toll on their relationships. The excitement of discovery had shifted into a more intense and personal struggle, with the pressure of the secrets driving wedges between them. In the midst of the tension, Susan discovered a small, hidden door behind a stack of old crates. "Look at this," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. This wasn't in the photograph, but it might be worth checking out. The family gathered around the hidden door, their earlier frustrations momentarily forgotten. Samantha carefully pried it open, revealing a narrow passageway leading down into the darkness. The passage was damp and narrow, the air cool and musty. With flashlights in hand, they descended into the passage, their steps echoing off the stone walls. The passage opened into a small, subterranean chamber. Inside, the room was lined with shelves holding dusty boxes and old artifacts. The chamber was dimly lit by a single, flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. Michael's flashlight beam fell upon an old chest in the corner of the room. "This looks promising," he said, approaching the chest with a mixture of hope and apprehension. The chest was ornate, with intricate carvings that hinted at its significance. Samantha and Susan joined him as he carefully opened the chest. Inside, they found a collection of old letters, photographs, and documents, items that seemed to match the clues they had been following. Among them was a letter addressed to Samantha's great-grandmother, written in a delicate script. Samantha picked up the letter, her hands trembling as she read the contents. The letter revealed a personal connection to the secrets they had been uncovering, a revelation that shook her to her core. It spoke of hidden family wealth and an intricate web of deceit that had been carefully hidden away for generations. The letter's contents were both shocking and enlightening. It provided clarity on some of the mysteries they had been grappling with, but it also introduced new questions. The family's sense of discovery was mixed with the weight of the revelations, adding a new layer of complexity to their quest. The atmosphere in the chamber shifted from tension to reflection. The secrets they had uncovered were both a burden and a revelation, forcing them to confront truths they had not anticipated. The family stood in silence, processing the gravity of their discoveries. As they prepared to leave the mill, the family's interactions were marked by a renewed sense of introspection. The revelations had deepened their understanding of the past, but they also brought to light the personal conflicts and hidden truths within their own lives. The quest for answers had become a journey of self-discovery, with the pressure of the past continuing to shape their present. The chapter concluded with the family emerging from the mill, their spirits tempered by the weight of their discoveries. The path forward was unclear, but the revelations they had uncovered promised to bring new insights and challenges. The journey was far from over, and the family's resolve was tested as they faced the complexities of their newfound knowledge. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the family's driveway. The discoveries of the past few days had left them on edge, their minds swirling with unanswered questions and strained relationships. The revelation of the hidden chest had not only deepened their understanding of the family's secrets, but also intensified the underlying conflicts among them. Samantha's phone buzzed, breaking the uneasy silence that had settled over the house. It was a message from William, the lawyer handling their late uncle's estate. He wanted to meet with them urgently to discuss the recent findings. The message was brief, but the gravity of the request was clear. The family gathered in the living room, the atmosphere thick with tension. The letters and documents they had found in the mill lay on the coffee table, their contents now a focal point of their growing unease. The old clock on the wall ticked rhythmically, each tick seeming to echo their mounting anxiety. William arrived promptly, his expression serious as he stepped through the door. He greeted them with a curt nod and made his way to the table, where the family had laid out the various documents. Samantha motioned for him to sit, her hands trembling slightly as she took her place across from him. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," Samantha said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We've uncovered some new information, and we need to understand what it means for the estate." William took a deep breath and began to examine the documents laid before him. His brow furrowed as he flipped through the pages, his professional demeanor giving way to a look of concern. "These are indeed significant findings," he said slowly. "The documents and letters you've uncovered reveal a complex web of transactions and family secrets that were kept hidden for decades." Michael leaned forward, his frustration evident. "What does this mean for us? Are there any legal implications we need to be aware of?" William looked up, his eyes meeting Michael's with a mixture of caution and resolve. "The estate's legal status is more complicated than we initially thought. The documents suggest that your uncle may have been involved in illicit activities that could affect the inheritance. Additionally, there are conditions attached to the inheritance that were not previously disclosed." Susan's eyes widened in disbelief. "Illicit activities? What kind of activities are we talking about?" William cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. "The documents mention secret investments and transactions that appear to be linked to criminal enterprises. If these activities are proven, it could complicate your claim to the inheritance and potentially implicate you in legal proceedings." The room fell silent, the weight of William's words sinking in. The family exchanged uneasy glances, their previous discoveries now tainted by the possibility of legal trouble and moral compromise. The confrontation with the lawyer had laid bare the risks they faced, adding a new layer of tension to their already strained dynamics. Mrs. Whitaker broke the silence, her voice trembling. "What should we do now? How can we protect ourselves and ensure that we honor our family's legacy without becoming entangled in these issues?" William looked thoughtful. "You'll need to conduct a thorough investigation into the nature of these activities. It may be wise to consult with legal and financial experts who specialize in these matters. Additionally, you may want to consider whether you wish to pursue the inheritance under these new circumstances." Samantha nodded, her expression a mix of determination and resignation. "We need to make sure we understand everything fully before making any decisions. This legacy is part of our family's history, and we owe it to ourselves and to our ancestors to handle it with care." As William gathered his papers and prepared to leave, the family was left to process the gravity of their situation. The confrontation had exposed new challenges and uncertainties, forcing them to confront not only the legal ramifications of their findings, but also the personal and moral implications. The tension that had been building among them was now palpable, each member grappling with their own fears and doubts. The revelations about their uncle's involvement in illicit activities had cast a shadow over their pursuit of the truth, complicating their path forward. As the evening grew darker, the family remained seated, lost in their thoughts. The confrontation with William had marked a turning point in their journey, introducing new elements of conflict and uncertainty. The path to resolving their family's legacy was now fraught with even greater challenges, demanding careful consideration and resolution. The days following the confrontation with William were heavy with tension and uncertainty. The family had retreated to their respective corners, each grappling with the weight of the revelations about their uncle's illicit activities and the impact on their inheritance. The house, once a haven of familial warmth, now seemed like a battleground of unresolved conflicts and strained relationships. Samantha sat alone in the study, surrounded by piles of documents and old letters. The soft light from the desk lamp illuminated her tired face as she sifted through the papers, her mind racing with questions and concerns. The weight of the truth they had uncovered felt like an anchor pulling her down, and the path forward seemed increasingly murky. Michael's voice broke the silence as he entered the room, his tone tinged with frustration. "I've been thinking about what William said. This is more complicated than we imagined. We need to find out exactly what we're dealing with before we can make any decisions." Samantha looked up, her eyes meeting Michael's with a mixture of weariness and resolve. "I agree. We have to figure out what the extent of these illicit activities is and what it means for us. But we also have to consider the impact on our family's reputation and our own integrity." Susan and Mrs. Whitaker joined them, the four of them forming a tense circle around the cluttered desk. "We can't ignore this," Susan said, her voice tight with emotion. "If we're implicated in these activities, it could destroy everything we've worked for." Mrs. Whitaker nodded, her expression one of deep concern. "The stakes are higher than ever. We need to proceed carefully and make sure we're prepared for any outcome." The family decided to hire a private investigator to delve deeper into the nature of their uncle's activities and to assess any legal ramifications. The decision was not made lightly, as they knew it would come at a significant cost both financially and emotionally. But it was a necessary step to protect themselves and to honor their family's legacy. As they waited for the investigator's report, the atmosphere at home grew increasingly strained. Conversations became clipped and guarded, and the weight of the unknown pressed heavily on their interactions. The emotional toll was evident in their faces and in the silences that punctuated their daily routines. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, the doorbell rang. The investigator had arrived, bringing with him a thick folder of documents and a somber expression. He was a middle-aged man with a no-nonsense demeanor, and his presence only heightened the tension in the room. After dinner, they gathered in the living room to hear the investigator's findings. The room was dimly lit, casting long shadows on the walls as the investigator began to speak. His voice was steady, but the gravity of his words was clear. "After a thorough investigation, I can confirm that your uncle was indeed involved in several illicit activities. There were secret transactions linked to criminal enterprises, and these activities have far-reaching implications. The documents you found are just the tip of the iceberg." Samantha's heart sank as she listened, her mind racing with the implications of the investigator's report. "What does this mean for us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The investigator took a deep breath before continuing. "The activities could potentially implicate you in legal troubles. However, if you can demonstrate that you had no knowledge of these activities and that you've acted in good faith, it may be possible to avoid direct legal consequences. But it will require a careful and well-documented defense." The family sat in stunned silence, the weight of the investigator's words sinking in. The price of truth was proving to be far higher than they had anticipated, with the potential for legal and personal consequences looming large. As the investigator left, the family was left to process the enormity of their situation. The path forward was fraught with challenges, and the cost of uncovering the truth had become starkly apparent. The emotional and financial burden of addressing their uncle's legacy was now a pressing reality. Samantha, feeling the weight of the situation, turned to her family. "We need to make some hard decisions. We must decide whether to continue pursuing the inheritance, knowing the risks, or to distance ourselves from the past and move forward." Michael, his face etched with concern, nodded in agreement. "Whatever we decide, we need to be united in our approach. The price of truth is high, but we must face it together." The family's resolve was tested as they faced the harsh realities of their situation. The price of uncovering the truth was steep, and their journey was far from over. The emotional and legal complexities of their discoveries had brought them to a crossroads, forcing them to confront the harsh realities of their family's legacy. The dawn broke gently over the horizon, casting a soft, golden light across the family's home. The previous days had been a whirlwind of emotions, legal challenges, and deep reflections. The truth about their uncle's past had tested their resolve and unity, but it had also brought them to a moment of profound decision-making. The family gathered in the kitchen for breakfast, the room filled with the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the sizzle of bacon. The warmth of the morning sun contrasted starkly with the cool, distant light of their previous confrontations. It was a new day, and with it came a sense of tentative hope. Samantha looked around the table at her family. Michael, Susan, and Mrs. Whitaker were all present, their faces showing a mix of exhaustion and cautious optimism. The events of the past weeks had brought them closer, forcing them to confront their values and their future. "I've been thinking," Samantha began, her voice steady but full of resolve, "about what we've been through and what it means for us moving forward. We've faced a lot, and I think it's time we decide what our next steps should be." Michael nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. "We've uncovered some heavy truths, and the weight of those truths has been immense. But we need to look forward now. What can we do to turn this situation into something positive?" Susan, who had been quiet for most of the meal, spoke up. "I think we should focus on the future. We can use the lessons we've learned to rebuild and redefine our family's legacy. It's not about the inheritance anymore. It's about what kind of family we want to be." Mrs. Whitaker, who had been reflecting quietly, added, "We've faced challenges that most families never encounter, but we've done so together. Maybe it's time to channel that strength into something meaningful and constructive." The conversation shifted from the burdens of the past to the possibilities of the future. They discussed potential projects and community involvement, ways they could use their experiences to make a positive impact. It was clear that they were all ready to move forward and create a new chapter for themselves. As the morning progressed, Samantha made a decision. She would donate a portion of the estate's remaining assets to a charitable organization dedicated to helping families affected by financial and legal difficulties. It was a way to honor their family's legacy, while also making amends for the shadow that had loomed over their recent discoveries. The family agreed to support Samantha's decision, feeling a sense of relief and purpose. It was a way to transform their experiences into something positive, to contribute to a cause greater than themselves. With their plan in place, the family set about making arrangements for their new initiative. They worked together to finalize the donation and to organize a small event to announce their decision. It was a gesture of goodwill, a way to demonstrate that even in the face of adversity, they could emerge stronger and more united. The day of the event arrived, and the family stood together in the community center, preparing to unveil their contribution. The room was filled with local residents, community leaders, and media representatives, all eager to hear about the family's decision. Samantha took the stage, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Today, we are here to announce a new chapter in our family's story. We have decided to donate a significant portion of the estate to support families facing financial and legal challenges. It's our way of giving back and using our experiences to make a difference." As she spoke, the family looked out at the audience, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment and relief. The challenges they had faced had forged a new path for them, one filled with hope and purpose. The event concluded with heartfelt speeches and expressions of gratitude from the community. The family's decision had been well received, and they felt a renewed sense of connection to the world around them. As they left the community center, the family walked together, their spirits lifted by the positive impact of their actions. They had faced significant obstacles and had come through them with a newfound strength and unity. The shadows of the past were beginning to recede, and a new beginning awaited them. The transition to their new chapter was marked by a sense of closure and optimism. They had turned their challenges into opportunities for growth and change, and their future was now filled with possibilities. The journey had been difficult, but it had ultimately led them to a place of renewal and hope. The family's story was one of resilience and transformation, a testament to their ability to face adversity and emerge stronger. With their newfound purpose and unity, they were ready to embrace the future and build a new legacy, one grounded in their shared experiences and values. Click on the video being recommended to you now.